In this video, we are going to go ahead and work on the rhythm and time signature worksheet. Now, specifically in this one, if you have a copy of this, great. If not, then you can go ahead and follow along in this video. But what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and practice writing the time signatures in the boxes provided here on the left, specifically right here. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to write in the counts for each of those examples. So let's go ahead and zoom in and work on that. But here we have number one. So the first thing that you want to do is pay attention, of course, to your measure line, or also known as bar line. And then what you want to do is just kind of count how many beats there are, right? Here we have 3/4 notes off the bat, which is great, okay? So 3/4 notes. And then, of course, you just want to confirm that the other measure has that number, right? So, and again, a half note is worth 2 beats. So we would go ahead and say that that's beats 1 and 2. And then this would be beat number 3. And so what that means is that we are, of course, dealing with 3 beats. And again, what we see is that there are 3/4 notes. So here we would end up having 3, 4. If we keep going down, here we end up seeing that we have 2/4 notes. Again, we have a half note here that is 2, worth 2 beats. And then we have 1 and 2 for the quarter rests. So here we would have an example of 2/4. Now, if I'm going a little bit too fast for you, or specifically, if you wanted to go ahead and try this on your own, go ahead and pause. But we're going to go ahead and kind of fly right through these. Now, when we talk about this one, here we end up having a whole note, which is worth 4 beats. Then we have a half note. So we have 4 beats. Then we have a half note that's worth 2. This quarter note would be the 3rd beat in the measure, and then this one would be the 4th beat. And then here we have a whole rest, again, worth 4 beats. So here we would have 4, 4. Now, some of you might be saying to yourselves, okay, well, could it be 2, 2? You're absolutely right. It could also be 2, 2. 2, 2 and 4, 4 technically would have the same kind of amount of notes in it, right? But all of a sudden, the feeling changes. And that's one thing that oftentimes confuses people, but the time signature does a lot for us in our understanding of how the music moves in terms of its pacing, as well as some other musicality things in terms of what notes are significant and what notes are not. Going to measure 4, here we have a quarter rest and then an 1/8 rest, okay? So we're looking at kind of, if we were to base it off of quarter notes, 1 beat and then half of a beat, but then we have a full measure of just 1/8 notes, right? And then we have a dotted quarter note here. So here we could actually say that this is worth 3/8, okay? 3/8. Again, this would be like beats 1 and 2. This would be beat number 3. This would be beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and then of course this has 3 beats in it, right? Remember that because the 8 is on bottom, now all of a sudden an 1/8 note is equal to 1 beat, no longer a quarter note. Here we have an interesting example that shows a similar thing, but on the opposite end of things. So here we have 1, 2, 3 half notes, right? And let's just go ahead and make sure that that's the case, but we have a whole note, which is worth 2 half notes, right? And that makes sense because, again, a whole note is worth 4. So, again, 2 half notes where 2, again, each of them are usually worth 2 counts or 2 beats. Of course, that makes a lot of sense that 2 half notes would then equal, of course, our whole note. But we have a whole note that would be worth 2 of our, or 2 half notes, right? 2 half note beats. Then this would be 3. Here we would have 1, 2, and 3. So now the way that we would write this is, again, you notice how many half notes there are and how big the beats are. This here would be 3, 2. Again, we have 3 beats in a measure, and then our half note is the beat here. It's much easier to count also based on the half notes. If we had more like quarter notes or something like that, we maybe could argue that it's 6, 4, right? But in this case, this is 3, 2. And the last one, again, similar to the 3/8 situation, all of a sudden now what we're looking for is okay, so we see a lot of 16th notes. Why not say that those are the beats? So here we have a measure that has 2 16th notes and then a 16th rest. So 1, 2, 3, okay? We have a dotted 1/8 note that is equal to also 3 16th notes. We have an 1/8 note, which is equal to 2 16th notes, and then a 16th note by itself. So here we would have 3 16, okay? And it's a little bit tricky, and especially because of this dot, and that's what I wanted to go ahead and end with today is the dot in general. Now, whenever we're talking about dotted notes, the dot is always on the side of the note, the right side of the note. It's never on the left side, it's not above or below. It's always on the right side. So now you can find that the dot on the right side of the notes, it specifically adds half of the note's value that it's attached to. So for example, right, whenever we're talking about a dotted quarter note, if you remember, is 1.5 beats, right? So again, the quarter note itself is referring to the full beat, and then half, that dot, is half of that quarter note. So that's why we get the additional half beat. But you can oftentimes find the half of the value of a note by asking yourself a question of what two notes add together to make your note that you're looking at. So for example, in the case of the quarter note, if I'm trying to find a dotted quarter note, what I could ask first is, okay, a quarter note is equal to 2 of what note? And then we realize that a quarter note is equal to 2 eighth notes, right? And so if I were to say then that 2 eighth notes is equal to a quarter note, that would mean that 1 eighth note is half of a quarter note. And the other eighth is the other half, right? We can split that into 2 different parts, right? So an eighth note and an eighth note, 2 halves are equal to that 1 quarter note. So if we looked at a dotted quarter note, that would mean that that's equal to, again, a quarter note plus half of a quarter note. So a dotted quarter note, really what it equals is a quarter note plus an eighth note together. And you can, of course, try this with other notes, right? And so here we have a dotted half note. So step A, right? You're thinking to yourself, okay, a half note is equal to what 2 notes together? What 2 notes combined? And that's 2 quarter notes, right? And so again, 1 quarter note technically is half of a half note. And so the way that a dotted half note works is a dotted half is equal to a half note plus a quarter note. Half note plus a quarter note. For the dotted eighth note, and again, this dot is quite small, but a dotted eighth note, same steps. So again, asking yourself, an eighth note is equal to 2 of what? It's equal to 2 16th notes. And so 1 16th note is equal to half of an eighth note. And then, of course, our dotted eighth is equal to then an eighth note plus a 16th note. And this has been a quick explanation on time signatures and specifically the answers to the rhythm and time signature worksheet.